Intuitive Life and Business Sparks, your podcast to reconnect to your intuition, to lead a life to the fullest from your heart with health, wealth, happiness and deep connection with yourself and others. Thank you for letting me serve. Welcome to Intuitive Life and Business Podcast. Today I have another wonderful interview guest, Karin Hagelin. And I'm so grateful that you're here with me today, Karin. Thank you for being with me.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Barbara. I'm so looking forward.
It's going to be exciting. So Karin is a life crisis coach. And as we spoke last time with Edson and Selena, Karin was in the same workshop 10 years ago. And we met there for the first time. And that's how we are connected. We have had this workshop together, and I think these 10 years have changed us a lot. And looking back now, we're still close, we're still friends, and we have like accompanied each other on this journey. And it's so beautiful to see how we, each of us has like gone their way and developed and like flourished.
Yeah.
So I would love you to tell what kind of person you were at that time, 10 years ago, and like parts of your journey and what maybe also moments where it clicked, where you realized.
Okay. So hi, everyone. 10 years ago, I had a tiny baby and a 2-year-old toddler. And this was by far the first time I had been exposed to some serious personal development. You know, I had no clue. I knew that I'd always been looking for stuff like that, because I can look back now and see I was always like reading, leadership books, management leadership books, all of that stuff that was sort of the precursor to what we then learned in the workshop, right? So the interest has always been there, and the interest in human beings and how we work has always been there. But I so remember that workshop because it must have pressed a lot of buttons in me, because it was very highly emotional for me. And yes, I was breastfeeding at the time too, so that probably didn't help, but it somehow stirred something in me. Something that couldn't then go back to rest after the workshop. However, I did start my normal corporate job afterwards, and I even went ahead and, had another corporate job after. So it took a few years for everything to sort of settle and align. So it wasn't like an overnight thing. The workshop was in 2010. I did my training, the topic we're going to speak about today, in September 2012. So that's a 2.5 year period even for it all to settle. So I just want to encourage everyone that is listening that it's not an overnight success story. It takes time, and it takes, everything needs time to sort of align first. But don't give up hope.
I so much agree. It's also, even if you try it again with your head, you think you have to do this now. You're allowed to try. And it's also this picture. Okay, Barbara, you tried this. It didn't work. It's okay. Try something else.
Yeah.
All good.
Yeah. And actually, I just recently heard, and apparently this is a very sort of well-quoted quote, you're never rejected, you're only redirected.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and we've felt that over the years as well, right? I mean, we try something and then it doesn't align anymore, and then we just get redirected. And as long as we are in flow and flexible enough and not scared to hold on to the old, we just adapt and we take the new direction.
some might think now, yeah, you are now at your spot. It's so easy to tell from that spot. But as we say both, it's 10 years ago.
It
It
is
didn't
10
happen.
years ago. No, it didn't. No, not at all. And it's still happening as we speak.
Mm,
I mean, we're
mm,
never done. We're never fully educated or fully where we want to be, because with all the knowledge and the new experience, you want to take it to the next level and the next and the next. So there's always something new that you're striving for as well.
mm, mm. Feels like a journey, a life journey, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
and mm. So I remember you were I was too. We were both quite sad persons at that moment in life. And where did you find the courage to start going for your dreams? How did that develop?
With me, I mean, you have to sort of get to know your telltale signs. I'm an old sailor, so in the sail you have those little threads in the sail to show that you're absolutely optimal towards the wind, right? And my telltale signs are when I get really like agitated and a bit pissed off, to be honest. That's when I know that I need to change and I need to do something new. And I so remember, because I'd been in a corporate job I absolutely did not like at all. So we said, okay, I'll be home with the kids and save all the money that we're putting towards daycare. And I remember my mom was visiting here in Zurich, and I was basically almost yelling in the living room, like, what am I supposed to do then? And she just pointed at a book in my bookshelf. Honestly, this is how it happened. She's like, why don't you check if they have courses? And the book she was pointing at was the Grief Recovery Handbook that I had bought in 2003, 2 years after my dad passed away, when I was sitting in one of those trains, commuter trains in Stockholm, reading it's called Metro, those newspapers that are on the trains, and I saw an ad in there, and it said, are you in grief? This is the book, da da da, and I swear to you, I clipped out the coupon and I sent it in by post, because we didn't do online then. And I got the book and I started reading it, and it was just too intense. I was like, whoa. And it went up in my bookshelf, and somehow it made the journey over from Sweden to Switzerland as well. And it was just standing there. And immediately I went online, and this is now 2012. And I went online, and of course they had courses. And of course, they had something called, a week course to be able to help other people do the journey as well. And I was like, okay, I've got all this experience. I can't put myself through a X amount of year psychology training. I need to go now. And this is by far the best slip of, certification I can get to be able to help other people through grief. So up I went to Stockholm and did the training. And that's sort of when it started.
I get goosebumps.
Yeah. And that's how it happens, it's never, you can look at it and it's like, it's so random and yet so very well orchestrated.
And there are all these, little signs and little angels, or whatever you want to call it, who like point, and they try again and try again.
Yeah, and that's another thing, that we have this fear of missing out, right? And just trust that universe will ring the doorbell many, many times until you get the message that you need. So that's also something that I am still practicing on, to actually just relax and really trust that the alarm bell or the doorbell or whatever, it's going to ring several times until I get the message, and not give up.
Yeah. Oh, I love that part, because it's not this, I have to fight and go and.
No.
I love the saying that the universe has something like a plan, and that plan is not your business, none of your business. It's like you're allowed to surrender and like, of course, keep your antennas open and let yourself be guided also by your like joy and this light, the easy things.
Yeah.
As you say, it doesn't always have to be the big certificate and the extreme diploma. I think it's more that you have the courage to make these first steps and to go in a certain direction and see if it resonates, and if it doesn't, try again.
Try something else. Exactly. Tweak it. Do something else. No, but I mean, we often. I mean, in my experience now, the only thing I can do is to show up. That's my job, to show up, because I don't know who I'm going to meet in that cafe, or who I'm writing that next newsletter to. I mean, I sometimes feel like, oh, why am I writing newsletters? I mean, what's the point? Who is reading this anyway? And then I get a message like, it touched my heart, and I'm so glad that you're writing them, and I always read them, and that's sort of my only nourishment right now in all this crazy. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, I can't stop now, can I? So
that's also part of my motivation. I tell, to take out the pressure, I tell myself, if one person is listening or can take something out, it's job is done. I can make it
exactly. Yeah. And I mean, they have effects then on their day, and that's going to impact other people. So we never know what we are the catalyst of. So as long as, I mean, it sounds so cliche, but as long as you're showing up and doing it with the passion and the joy, then just keep on doing it. I mean, I've been doing this for 7 years now, and I'm by far not where I want it to be. But that's just because I'm so stubborn and I'm not giving up. I just have to like chip at it every single day. And again, work on the trust.
And to me, it feels where your power is like holding the space. You're just so present, and I think that's where people feel so safe and so heard and so at home. Maybe could you tell what you're doing today, and how it came? You started with the first course, and what happened?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you don't. In Sweden, we used to have this, career advisors in school, right? And I mean, I'm sure you have all over the world. And no one told me to be like a grief recovery specialist or a life crisis coach. Obviously not. So I need to just give some background that in 2006, our first daughter was born. And she was born with a genetic disease called spinal muscle atrophy type 1, which we had no idea what it was. But it's basically like ALS, but for babies. So no muscle tonus. And they just told us that she has maximum 5 more months to live. And we were new in Switzerland, new language, new city, no immediate family or friends, and no internet, no Facebook groups, nothing was available in 2006. It wasn't like I could just go into an, expat mom group and write like, hi, where can I get support? So again, me being me, I was just like, if this is what is available for a grieving family, when I have contacted all the Swedish resources, everything I can sort of possibly arrange here with the Swiss resources, I need to do something about that. This can't be the only not so helpful help you can get in a situation like that. So, but again, I was grieving so badly, obviously, And then we fell pregnant fairly soon after Ingrid left in May of 2007. So little sister Elin was born, and then little brother Victor was born, who was then in the baby when we met. And it took, as I said, it took a couple of years for me to just let all of that settle for myself too. And so, Victor was by then 2.5 years old when I did the course. So, and Ingrid had been gone for several years, but I just needed to heal myself first in order to hold space for others, because we human beings, we sense if someone can hold space or not. And if you're not done yet, if you're still hurting, or that your client feel that maybe I will trigger her if I tell my story, that's not going to be the safe space you want to give to another person. So I needed to do my own healing first. And that took some years. But then, I was ready.
I love that you say that, because so many people, they say, I had this and this and this trauma, and then I switched it. It always sounds like it happens within weeks, and that's not the case.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
No, it's not the case. And we have to, it's like now during Corona times, right? We have to take care of our own personal hygiene first, both the physical hygiene and the emotional hygiene. And we so often forget the emotional hygiene. We brush our teeth every day, but we never sort of brush off what happened during the day. So it just like tick, 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 tick. It just staggers, and all of a sudden the lid flies off, and we have no idea why it flew off at that point in time. But it was just because so many little things had happened before. And all of a sudden, it's going to be the last thing that breaks the camel's back. So,
So you have found beautiful tools to like go into these emotions and also set them free. Would you like to share some of them?
Absolutely. I try everything on myself first. So, and I'm a very pragmatic person, and I want things to work fairly quickly, so we don't drag out pain too long. So I found, obviously, I did the training in the grief recovery method, which is it's a book and homework assignment, and it's a very sort of a logical, intellectual program that teaches us about grief, how society views grief, that at least we in the Western world here we've sort of forgotten a little bit what it is to deal with death, because that's something we do in a hospital, tucked away, far away. We back in the day, we gave birth at home and we died at home. But now it's just this sort of sterilized, institutionalized thing that no one really wants to look at. So it takes you through that as well, that sort of knowledge of grief in of itself is actually a natural built-in process that we all are born with to deal with. And if we have enough empathic people around us, if you look at all the cultures and all the religions, most of them have, I can say all of them probably have some way of coping with grief, that you give it a year and, you're cooked for, you're organized for, people come and help you clean. All of that stuff used to happen by itself because it was built into the culture. But we've lost that. So we sit at home in our tiny apartment and, we don't have that anymore. We've sort of lost the bedside manners, of helping people through grief.
Yeah, it's exactly what happens, because people are like afraid to say the wrong things, or they don't know how to approach and don't want to run people over when they're in grief.
No.
So that's one of my important questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you shared a wonderful blog post about what to say and what not to say when people are in grief. And I think this is so important, that we're we're not losing, we don't run away when you meet somebody who's in grief, because that makes things even worse, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, it scares people when someone walks into the office again after a loss and you feel so uneducated in what to say. You stay quiet, right? I mean, that's just a normal thing to do, because you feel like, if I'm going to say something, I'm going to sort of step in it, or you don't think like that and you say something that is, factually true but very hurtful for the grieving person. So I feel like, the one rule of thumb to keep in mind is to say, I mean, the most decent thing you can say, if you don't know at all what to say at the moment, at least say, I don't know what to say, but I'm so sorry, and I'm here if you want to talk about it. And then saying that, you also have to be the one that can be there to talk about it. So you don't give empty promises. That's the second one. Don't give empty promises. And I think a third rule of thumb is to stay with the person who's grieving and not start with we call them intellectual comments in the grief recovery method, at least. Like, oh, but they're not suffering anymore, or there are plenty more fish in the sea after a breakup, or he wasn't good for you anyway, or at least they're not in pain, at least they're not suffering, all of these things are basically saying, I can't stand talking about your pain, so I'm going to move it over here and talk about that person instead. Which, I mean, all of that is factually true. I mean, people used to say to us, like, luckily we didn't have siblings when Ingrid passed away. Luckily we were young enough to have more kids. Luckily she didn't have to live too long with that disease, and so on and so forth. I mean, they're all factually true. We were young. We had more kids. She didn't have to suffer for long. It was actually a privilege for her to be in a baby body, in a buggy, and not an older child with muscle atrophy. Sure, but it wasn't helpful at the time to hear that. So, just say, I have no idea what to say. And just recognize that person is in pain.
What I also felt when I had a family who was grieving was this part you told about people come and cook for you, and people come and clean your house.
Yeah.
And maybe you're not that close that you can go into this house and do something, but even offering it, or like putting a cake into the post or something, it's just a symbol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's another thing. I mean, if you're like, like in our situation, I mean, people always very, very often say, call if you need anything. And they mean it with the most love and grace and care they can muster. I honestly, truly, truly believe that. But as the grieving person, it's going to be such a hurdle to lift the phone, because you're in so much pain that you can't even cook a meal. And you're not going to call someone and maybe bother them, to ask for help. So that's another thing. Just do. I've read another wonderful book since then. It's Option B by Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant. Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook, for those who don't know, who lost her husband fairly early. And she has stories where someone would just show up at the hospital and say, well, that was not her story, but a story that she told, like, I'm in the lobby for the next hour in case you need to come down for a hug. Or like a friend of ours, she just called and said, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. She called the same day as Ingrid passed. And she said, do you guys have food? And I'm like, no. Do you like Thai? Yes. I'm there in half an hour. I won't stay long. And half an hour later, she buzzed the phone and she was there with the Thai takeaway. I mean, it was the most amazing thing. So I think, just do. And if you're in the office with someone and you don't know them that well, anyway, just go up and say, let's go for a coffee together. Or would you like to just go for a walk around the block and get some air? Or look, I just brought cupcakes or whatever. I mean, just do something small that feels right for you. And that's another thing. Just do something that feels right for you, so it's not awkward, because the grieving person is still the same person, and they're acutely aware that they have lost someone, and they're acutely aware that it is awkward for everyone. So if you can just be the icebreaker with a little box of cupcakes or whatever, do it. Do it. Don't be shy.
It's maybe it's the wrong expression, but it's not like creating some normal experience in this situation.
No, but I mean, you can even say that. I know it's crazy, but this is, this is something I can do right now.
Yeah. I think it has, I'm in the head again, I think. As you said, our attitude to death is so alien at the moment. We have really unlearned to deal with these things. And even dead people, in our family, our grandmother and grandfather, they were still at home in the bedroom for 3 days, so people could say goodbye to them. It's like an old tradition. But I know that in many other parts or wherever, maybe also what kind of circumstances there are,
sure.
You don't have that chance to like say goodbye to a person. Is there something to support this process, or to, like rituals? I know you have a little grave in Sweden.
Yes.
Which you cherish.
Yeah. I mean, again, Ingrid is together with my dad in our hometown, which is lovely. But that obviously means that we can't go to a grave, routinely like many people do. So we have created, since that day, we have the same picture and a candle that we light every evening. And that's just a routine, just so she is present for our kids as well. For our now 10 and 12-year-old. And we're not doing a big thing out of it. It's just the candle who gets lit every evening. And that's just our routine, like brushing our teeth. And it's just a normal, natural thing that we do. About saying goodbye, it's all about intention. When Ingrid was at her worst, my granddad in Sweden passed away. And I obviously could not be there, and I couldn't go to the funeral because Ingrid was in such a bad state. So what I did, and what I thank my younger self for today for knowing this intuitively, was that I stepped outside onto our balcony here in Zurich, and I lit a candle for him. And I was just sitting there because it was in April, and I was just sitting there with a candle, thinking about all the memories and connecting in a very profound way. And it wasn't long, but I did it. And today, that is what I lean on, that I don't have any regrets of not going to the funeral. I was very close to my paternal grandparents. So I could have done a big, guilt thing of it, like, oh, I didn't go to his funeral, and oh my gosh, it was a one-time event and I missed it, because I didn't miss it. I made sure that I took the time and did what I could where I was.
Mm.
So instead of going into a guilt trip, choose grace. And just say, okay, this is the circumstances. What is the best thing I can do right now? What do I need to do right now? And it can be lighting a candle. It can be writing a letter. It can be looking at old photographs. It can be going out to nature, sending thoughts. It can be such, everyday simple things, but they matter.
I love this. You have this connection from wherever you are, even if you can't be next to this dying person or to this process.
Yes.
And also connecting to these events again and to the which brought you joy or what you experienced together.
Exactly.
It's like a wealth of energy and love. It
Absolutely. Absolutely. And another thing I want to say right there is just allow yourself to feel what you feel when you feel it. You have to allow yourself to feel the sadness, to feel the grief, to feel all of these feelings and not push them down. Because the minute you start pushing things down, that's when the clogging starts and the pain and the not going away or the sore neck or the back pain or whatever. So just, again, grace, allow yourself. It's not weak to cry. It's not, this is the normal, natural process that some days we will cry our eyes out and the next day we're actually quite okay. And that's okay. And every single person has their own way of grieving. So that's another thing. Don't judge. Because I meet many people that say, oh, I just lost my child. And this is how society views a person that has lost their child. And I'm not fulfilling that part. Because when I'm a grieving mom, for example, society expects me to behave in a certain manner. And that's not true. There is no society thinking. You are allowed to grieve in the way you choose that feels best for you.
Yeah, that's a very important point because all this pain, this suppressed pain will show up sooner or later.
Yeah, exactly.
And the more you suppress it, the more energy it takes from you. And maybe also it might come up in not very helpful ways.
Exactly. And it's always there, like, even though you don't think about it every day, but subconsciously it's leaking energy. It's like biking on a bike with a hole in the wheel. But you don't realize it until you might be, it might be something small in the office that happens and you just like explode and then it flies off. Because there are so many undealt with, unresolved issues underneath.
Do you feel too that what's happening in the US at the moment is also part of suppressed pain?
Yes, very much so.
I have the same feeling.
Yeah.
So maybe like if we have that pain and you tell us you are allowed to react to this pain in, let it out, cry. You have other tools, or you have one very helpful tool to if you're really at the point where you can't bear it or you don't know where to go with it, what would you suggest, or what's one of your magic tools?
Yeah, one of my magic tools is obviously EFT tapping. So it's emotional freedom techniques. And I added that to the grief recovery work I was doing because I felt like, we have the intellect, but a lot of things are stored in the body too. So how do I deal with a client that hits that point where something suppressed comes up to the surface again. And we happen to sort of double click on the file saying childhood trauma XYZ while we're working with today's grief. What do I do? And then EFT had been ringing my doorbell plenty of times. Plenty of times, Barbara. So many times. And it was really like, and then in 2014, it rang and didn't stop ringing. So again, off I went to Stockholm and did the training. Because I always do everything in my mother tongue because I work in so many languages. And it's nice to get up to Stockholm by yourself and hang out with friends. So I did the EFT training just to have like an emotional first aid tool. So I didn't have to say, oh, that's not my domain. You have to call a psychologist or a psychiatrist as soon as you can. I didn't want to send people away like that. So I added EFT, and today I always teach that tool. The only ones I don't teach it to are those who explicitly say I don't want to use it. And that's been like 1 or 2 people. But I always use it. And because, again, it helps you go down and release things that are so subconscious that you can't maybe even put words on them. And again, it just quickens the process of the healing, and really like profoundly, like it heals and then it doesn't come back, which is great. So that's a tool I can really recommend looking into more. I have resources on my website as well, but I could also show you here if you want to, but it's obviously weird on a podcast if you're listening to it.
I will be happy to link. I think you also have a few videos or something of.
I do have a whole. I have a whole blog post with 3 videos in them, so that you can go there and have a look. But that is such a great tool, and the way I use it, rather than going through the technical stuff, because you can look at the blog post later. But it's basically acupressure from the Chinese medicine. And you use points on your body that are easy to reach. They're primarily in your face, on your collarbone, and on top of your head. And right now they're doing so many cool research projects on this, with MRI scans, with blood sampling, with everything. It's so fascinating to read all of this that is coming out. So what they found out is that it reduces your cortisol in the blood with roughly 43% on average when you tap those points. It also changes the pathways in your brain. So if you have a craving, for example, say you crave potato chips, and it's going to be your primal brain, your reptile brain that sends out the signals. You have to have them, you have to have them, you have to have them. And then you do tapping she sent people home. And when I say she, it's Dr. Peta Stapleton at Bond University in Australia. She does tremendous research. And she sent them into an MRI scan. And after 4 weeks with self-managed tapping at home, she put them back into the MRI scan and nothing lit up. So it's changed the neuron, firing together thing, and it's no longer firing. So for example, in my case, I started using tapping on myself because, again, I always try the tools first, because I had such a fear of driving in the mountains, because after Ingrid passed away, we went up in the mountains and drove on the Simplon Pass and all of these tiny mountain roads, and I was in such grief, stress, and I was also newly pregnant with Elin. And I just saw us flying off the road and tumbling down to our death, And because I've been living in the mountains before, and it's never frightened me before, but it was just, interconnected with the high emotions I was feeling. So I started using tapping as we were going as a family up to the mountains, and I didn't want my kids to have a terrified mom in the front seat. So I started using tapping, and it was literally when we drove the first time and I was tapping, it was like the most awful experience. And then the next time we took the same road, it was just like, what was I so afraid of? Where are all these death looming, cliffs and, and it was just like, it's just a normal, pretty mountain road. What's the problem? And that is what I get a lot of feedback from my clients as well, is all of a sudden it's just like, what was I so afraid of? And why did that trigger me so much? It's, it's actually fabulous, because it's basically telling your stress response that when you talk about these things, it's just talking about a memory or a fear of the future, but it's not a life-death, full-on fight-flight response.
It's this lingering stress, which is like underneath somehow.
Exactly.
The tapping like brings it out, and it's very good to like deal with the acute feeling and stress.
Exactly. So when you are in fear, or I use it in a very pragmatic and everyday way. So if I burn myself in the kitchen, or if I slam my toe, or if one of the kids fall off a bike or whatever, we as a family, we use tapping immediately before getting to the cold water tap or before getting to the ice pack or whatever. We tap first, sort of on the way. And that is something that the listeners here can do too, like practice before, you don't want to learn CPR on the person that is actually on the floor. You want to practice on a doll first. So practice on smaller things in the beginning, and then maybe go to the bigger things. But emotional stuff is nice to have some guidance with, and have some support person that you can work it through with. But the everyday things, like, you burn your finger or you trip and fall or whatever, you just start tapping immediately, and it will calm down the whole stress response immediately. And I've done that so many times now, so I rarely bruise, or it goes away so fast. It's fascinating. It's so practical.
It feels like it triggers the self-healing process in your body too.
Exactly. And my kids learned this very early, of course. They were like 3-4 years old. And when my daughter turned 8, she said, "Mom, you don't have to tap on me anymore. I do it in my head."
Cool. Very cool. That's a new generation.
Yeah, so us oldies, we actually need the physical tapping still. But she just like, of course, I know that I self-heal. So she just does that quickly in her head now.
That's the next generation. We're not there yet.
No, I will probably never be there, but
so cool. Yeah, tapping for me is really like this first aid kit with plasters and disinfection and all that.
It is.
And as you said, if you feel that it's deeper, or that it's, you don't have to go through this alone. That's one of the messages we want to share here.
Exactly.
And looking for help is not a sign of like weakness. It's a sign of strength.
Exactly. I always say, if you have a toothache, you will go to the dentist as fast as you can, so you don't have to be bothered by it for so long, right? Or having complications later or whatever. You just go. But with the emotional, like toothache or emotional broken arm, we don't, and we just let it fester, and it gets infected, and it gets into physical pain, and we don't take care of ourselves the same way when it comes to emotional stuff. So I just want to educate people that it's okay, because my goodness, if you get that energy back and like when you sort of release and and deal with the past, you have so much energy to put into the future.
Yeah, into your life and into serving the world.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you heal yourself, and that's what I see, my primary passion is to help people heal and resolve old issues so that they can stand in their power and help other people. In whatever way, in a corporate setting, in a managerial setting, in a parent setting, in a neighbor setting, whatever. And that I find fascinating when I see what my clients go ahead and do afterwards. It's That's just like jaw-dropping stuff. It really is. I'm so proud.
Yeah. So that's one of the main, messages here too. So you don't have to go through grief or through crisis alone. And maybe it's also this old setting that we think we have to like fight our way through this and like struggle and pain and suffering. And of course it takes a while to like process all these feelings, emotions, and this whole thing. But it's so much helpful, or it feels so much lighter if you have somebody who holds space for you and who has an idea of what this feels like, and who can tell you also, there will be a light at the end of the tunnel, no matter how dark it is at the moment.
Exactly.
So you are this person to like go to when when things like that happen. It doesn't always have to be death, probably.
No,
it's also
not at all. I mean, we grieve I mean, currently many of us are grieving our old normal, right? I mean, we are opening up slowly, but we lost our way of living. Some have physically have lost jobs, source of income. We have lost a certain trust. We have lost the freedom of choice. All of a sudden, we couldn't send our kids to school anymore. All of a sudden, we couldn't go shopping anymore. All of a sudden, we weren't allowed in restaurants anymore. I mean, it's almost like war, but without the war. So there's so many losses on so many levels, but we don't see it as a reason to grieve. But then we go around with this weird feeling and like, I'm not satisfied anymore. I don't feel happy anymore. I can't sleep. I can't eat, or I eat too much, or, and we have never really addressed it, and we don't know what it is. And that's scary too.
Yeah, I see many people reacting on this situation in a grieving way.
Yeah, exactly. So if we can just recognize, like, oh my goodness, like I did with that newspaper, like, oh, it's grief I'm feeling. It's not a burnout. It's actually grief. And then you've named it.
Oh, wow,
and it's so much easier when you have a word. And like, okay, so this is grief. Okay, now I know why I feel so sad or empty or scared or frustrated. Okay, what do I do? What do I do with that next?
It feels like you have like a layer, the ground, and you're there at the source, more or less, or at the roots, and from there you can build up.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, we could talk for hours on this topic.
So, looking at the time, I think we will never end. No. But it's really important, and I wanted to have like the space and time to like share these topics. And where do people find you? Do you have like, that they hear it also? I will link your webpage.
Yeah, I have a brand new website called karinhagelin.ch. So I can be found there, and everything is on there. I also work online for most part. So, I have clients all over the world. So that is not a problem. So even though you might not live in Zurich or the vicinity of Zurich, I'm still reachable. So I want to say that as well. And
That's
I'm
great.
obviously on LinkedIn and Facebook, but you can find all of that as well on the website.
I will link you, yeah. And also the blog with the EFT videos. And yeah, it was a great pleasure talking to you, and you touched my heart.
Oh, so do you. I'm so proud. I'm so proud of what you've done too. It was a remarkable group 10 years ago.
Indeed.
And look at us now.
Still on the journey.
Oh yeah, we will always be on the journey. We just have to like assume that and just go forward with passion and joy, you know.
So thank you very much.
Well,
Karin,
thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me.
And have a wonderful day, all of you listening. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this whole episode. I highly appreciate your time and energy. If you feel that anything I told you resonated within yourself, please do not hesitate to check out my website at barbarabryce.com and see what I can do for you. I am grateful to serve.